Welcome to the course, International Studies in Vernacular Architecture. Today, we are going to discuss about Yonmenkaigi 4-square table system method for collaborative knowledge development. So, in fact, this is our last concluding lecture. So far, we have discussed about various understandings on dwellings, places, and the habitats, how different aspects of culture have changed, and the materiality, the natural hazards, the geography, the concepts. We discussed about it. Till now, you have heard from our understanding, and where Melissa, Annie, and myself, we talked about our experiences and our learnings, and we tried to put it forward for you. But the last session is going to be a kind of learnings from the community, what we learned from the community. So here you will be hearing from the words of the community representatives and the stakeholders from the hill communities. I'm going to talk about a particular workshop which we have recently conducted in our department as a part of a project which is funded by Indian Council of Social Science Research and Japan Society for the Promotion of Science, Japan. So this is a part of the project, as one of the tasks, and I'm go through this particular workshop. It's a participatory workshop on Yonmenkaigi 4-square table system method for collaborative knowledge development. So in Hindi, we call it as Char Varg Talika Pranali. So we conducted this on the 27th of August here in the Department of Architecture and Planning, IIT Roorkee. So the workshop coordinators, myself and my Japanese partner, Dr. Shubhajyoti Samadar and Dr. Uttam Kumar Roy. And we have actually invited the communities, the stakeholders, the decision makers, the Batwari block pramukhs, and the NGOs, and the local architects who are working with the hill communities, and certain people who are running the homestays. So different stakeholders were actually brought to this workshop, and there's certain issues which are deliberated in a particular format. First of all, let me tell you what is this Yonmenkaigi. So this is a particular method which actually been derived in the Japanese systems, and here, when the military was working with the communities, there is always a disconnect between the military understanding of and the community needs. So this is how a system has been developed, where Kaigi means meeting and Yonmen means there's a 4-square table. So basically, there's a 4 groups which are brought together, and they are being deliberated on a particular aspects and a particular theme, and then they interchange the roles. So in that process, they develop an understanding towards an action processes. So in that way, each of them actually come to these different roles, and they understand the issues from a different shoes as well. So that is how this particular workshop was very helpful to understand, not only from the experts or the scientific perspective, we need to understand from the community perspective, from the facilitators perspective, from the decision makers perspective. So before that, in the previous lectures, I have also explained about the climate change adaptation and the disaster risk reduction, where we did some studies in the hill mountain regions. And this is the context of the Barsu, Uttarakhand, where we can see that after the 2012 floods, the certain landslides have happened in the Swarigad area, and this is called Giri Pahad. And you can see that the settlement Barsu exists here. So day by day, they can see that gradually there is some damages which are happening onto these hill slopes, and it is actually affecting part of the villages. And today, if you go, almost 80 to 90% of the houses, either they have developed cracks, they have partly broken or completely broken down. You can see different levels of intensity, whether it is an old building or a newer buildings or any other items they have built. Gradually they could see that some changes are happening to these settlements and also to their buildings. So people believe that yes, the whole land mass is actually sliding down, and that was the reason why it is. But there was some groups which actually mentioned to us that some agency have done some drilling, and they tested these soil, and they actually said that yes, it is moving. But we have not found any such reports in our query, and we are also, neither the community has that copy of that. So we asked to procure that so that we get a thorough understanding of why this is happening. So this is a Gerat, again the traditional water mills of Uttarakhand. Almost 60,000 water mills are still abandoned, and they use, these are the alternative hydro energies, they use these natural forms, and in that way they use it as a flour mill. Right. So today there are many of these abandoned. So what we did was we actually tried to develop a base map of that, and we started engaging with the community, taking the consent from them, and we developed into, for a documentation purpose, we developed into different blocks, and then we have, from the community narratives, we have taken their mental map, how they feel risk from their perception, what the good things about their settlements, what are the problematic issues within that. So you can see people have really mapped down, this is a sliding zone, and they could able to understand where the potential of this risk is coming from and how. So this is basically from their minds and memories, their experiences and their observations. Even the school children, they talk about how the water bodies are coming up and how what they see and what they can even identify, how this rubble is falling down every day. So in that way, through the word of mouth or through their living experience, they were able to map down certain understanding of their settlements and certain changes which are happening. So as a team, we went and we have taken the consent of the people, and then we have actually started interacting with them, and we documented each and every house. So we can see that even the newer buildings which are constructed, they are also gradually deteriorating and they are getting cracks, including the traditional buildings. So the technologies which they adopted earlier, using the wooden which acts like a shock absorbing process. So now many of these are also, they are developing cracks. So what we did was, in order to get an understanding of a hotspot understanding, we developed a matrix using the Brunskill method, and after visiting 1 or 2 times, what are the typical housing typologies, we developed a matrix from here, and using particular reference to the Office of Prime Ministers in Japan document, so which they have actually showed us a direction how to grade. So in fact, by looking at the nature of cracks, the nature of damages, we could able to identify each of this building. Yes, this is in a grade 3 or grade 2, and with a photographic evidence. Like for example, you can see that these are newer buildings, but depending on the nature of the description they have given in the matrix, so we could able to find all the grading process. So then we further mapped on to what the communities have said and what is the real part. So when we actually talked about the community have said this was the most problematic part, but we can actually see that there is other areas which are also gradually deteriorating. So in fact, whatever the interactions we had earlier with the communities, they expressed many concerns that with the rodents, how the soil is loosened out, the langoos, the monkeys or any other wild animals that are coming to their crops, damaging their crops, the forest fires, and the traditional knowledge which is completely, the medicinal knowledge which is completely forgotten. So a lot of concerns which the communities have established. So what we did was we brought this community and other stakeholders to this workshop, including some facilitators like the practicing architects and the NGOs, and we conducted this workshop. So what we did was, first we have taken a written consent from all of them that we are recording and we would be using for the academic and the research purposes. With their consent, we have proceeded. First we explained the project, what we did in all these 2 years of time, how we have interacted with these settlements. We explained this whole process, what we learned from them. And in the Yonmenkaigi system, so what is this method about? So I tried to explain why we are conducting this workshop, what is the method and the protocols of this workshop. So here it consisted of 4 stages. One is the clarifying the main theme by the SWOT analysis. And the second is we drawing up the Yonmenkaigi chart by the 4 groups. And the third is the debating to improve the implementation of collaborative action plans among 4 groups. And the final part is the presenting joint up action plan for the groups. So in this process, we were able to do the first 2 successfully, and then the third, I think we need to do again with the community again, And so here the next time we'll be going out there and we'll be coming up with an action plan. So here the method could be summarized as follows, and you can see it is the process how we make the collaborative action plan to carry out community building activities for disaster restoration, and providing a shared space between local community and local government, sharing vision among local community people for community building from the flood disaster, and improving capacity of human resources in a local community. So this is what I call it as a Yonmenkaigi. So I've said about the time frame. So basically we come up with a theme after the SWOT analysis. So I'm going to show you a video of the certain deliberations, and based on that we come up with a theme of the resilient hill settlements and environments. So in that way there is 4 groups which are formed. One is the group A, so Batwari, Pramukh and certain decision making people who are part of it. Similarly the community stakeholders who are part of it, and we have the facilitators like NGOs or organizations who are part of it, and we have the scientific and academic expertise who are again part of it. So there are 4 different themes, and in this particular chart we put a time frame. In our project we put from 6 to 12 months and 12 to 24 months and 24 to 36 months. What kind of actions? Because the first half of the day we discussed about the problems, the strengths, weaks, threats and opportunities, but whereas the second half we discussed about the follow-up actions, what we should do. So I'm just going to run through this video, and before that I'll brief you what we have discussed. So strengths, weaks, opportunities and threats we have also written in Hindi, and the whole conversation we conducted in Hindi so that the local people can easily understand. So one of the important strengths which they said is the climate and the natural resources. That is the strength of them, hill communities. And more importantly the unity, the unity of these, like if some village is in a distressed situation, the other villages will come forward. So that is the level of unity they had, and that is what the communities are able to tell that. And we have the strength is the arts and crafts, the skills. Today they are also having some issues in finding the skilled resources, but still they believe it is a strength, and their belief systems, and their natural resources, and they have these Sramdan, the Sramdan process. Like imagine someone is building a house or something, so the whole village they contribute something, they contribute their effort to make some public facility or anything. So in that way every villager they take a role in this process. That is one of the strength they said. They said yes, the technology is also strength. At the same time they also said technology is also a weakness. Because of the technology there are good things happening, but they are also mentioning that yes, they are not something which are not very good for their daily activities, like even the yoga and other things which are part of their lives, and migration. Again, migration they consider it as a strength. At the same time there is also a threat, because yes, the people who didn't migrated here, they remained as it is in the hills, but the people who went, but their next generation, they went and they got jobs, better jobs, their children were educated, and then they come back. Obviously they could able to see some differences, the people who went to plains and the people who remained in hills, both from economically, from literary point of it, from their status point of it. So in that way they see that there is also a strength in the migration, but at the same time they express that yes, migration is also creating challenges. And when it comes to the weaknesses, we have this transfer of knowledge and how we transfer, because they have rich knowledge of medicinal herbs, they have rich knowledge of understanding of places, their waste management. But how do we transfer from one generation to another generation? Similarly, the technology, that is, as I said to you before, it is also considered as a weakness. And the involvement of the local communities in the DRR policies. So what they believe is like, the policies and the training programs which are happening at the block level or a district level, they doesn't reach to the villagers, how we have to protect ourselves from the disasters. So in that way, they're concerned about how these policies why are they not involved in that level? These training programs, why is not reaching to that level? So lack of skill development, so that is also one of the weakness, and lack of physical and digital connectivity. Let's say if some damage happened during a disaster, how do they escape with a different route, or how they're physically connected, how do we reach to these places? Especially for the pregnant women, they travel for many kilometers to reach to a hospital. The children travel to many kilometers to reach to a school. Sometimes there will be a wild animals. So all these concerns they mentioned, and similarly the digital connectivity. If they have to call someone on an emergency, sometimes there are some places which even the phone signal will not reach. And real-time info, because when we talk about certain disaster happened on uphills, but some other activity happens in a lower side, what happened in the hills, how the water was flowing, they are not able to get that real-time information in any kind of rescue efforts or any rehabilitation efforts. So in that way, they would be happy to see that if there is some real-time data which happens somewhere else, they could able to get that access to that. And similarly, the learning from the previous disasters. Yes, we are living in a disaster-prone areas, but how much we are learning from that and how we are improving it, that particular methodology is not very clear. Then incremental overflows and prediction from the natural responses. Earlier, their ancestors, they used to look from just the bird's movement, the flora and fauna, the way the behavioral process, how the blossoming process, they could able to predict yes, something is going to happen, or they could able to predict certain frost timings so that they can safeguard their crops. And similarly, there is an improper waste management. Now the waste is coming even from the plains because of the many products which are coming from the plains to the hills, but earlier it was more sustainable. They used to survive what they used to get. So the joint families have now become, many of them have become nuclear families. So that is also one of the weakness which the communities have mentioned. And similarly, the opportunities. They said development is both as an opportunity and a threat. Similarly, the forest tax, they consider it as a threat. And there are many disasters, disaster, they mentioned both as a threat and as well as a development, as an opportunity, because it provides an opportunity for them to develop further, to learn something new, So I was a little surprised to see how the communities said, yes, we need disaster because we learn from that. And we develop from there. So at the same time, it is taking many lives. And the skill development, the ghost villages were abandoned. So there are some villages, no one lives there, and how these migration is also a process which is creating these such kind of ghost villages. And how can we enhance these villages in the context of tourism, like how we can actually promote them with the help of alternative tourism process or any other development process. How can we promote these medicinal herbs and, the natural resources, and similarly the alternative energy, like we talked about the garages, and how we can rediscover these things and make them active so that they can less dependent on the energy process. But of course, one has to really look at, if something is getting ready-made to you, and why do they go far away and get it done? So there's always deliberations on that. So one of the important aspect which they mentioned is the conservation of these old homes, whether in the context of ghost villages or when the context of the abandoned buildings. So how we can conserve them, because the tradition has to be showcased. So now many of these traditional buildings were bought by people, investors from Haryana or Delhi or Punjab, some other nearby areas. But they are concerned about what happens to the local, because there is a newer investments coming in. At the same time, when we were talking about these, when community have expressed this, but the experts have also pointed out, who is actually selling these places? It is the community who is selling these places. There is always the need and the want process. So how do we really conserve the traditional buildings in that process, so that at least they maintain certain character? And the control tourism, because in one side, especially for these Chardham Yatra or any other pilgrimages, Sometimes there used to be a mass tourism also, especially for the trekking and other things. So how can we really control this part? Because there's very limited resources for the people to get access, and this produces waste, this produces a lot of unexpected and unwanted things there, you know. So in that way, how can we control, what kind of guidelines we can come up with to have a certain control tourism activities? And when we talk about the threats, you know, the crop productions, how they have reduced, and mainly the trade-off activities where the middlemen played an important role. That is one of the threats where the farmers are not getting the right benefit. You know, the traditional farming methods, they are again on a threat. Again, the improper medicinal herbs, water resources, and the tourism, like that. They started listing out various activities in terms of strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats. Of course, some of them are overlapped with each other because a disaster was an opportunity and as well as a threat. Development was an opportunity and as a threat. You know, like that. There are a couple of things overlaid. Tourism they want for economy, at the same time they don't want more. You know, they need to be controlled. You know, so in that way they expressed all these concerns, and after that what we did was we actually in the second half we conducted the group exercises where each smaller groups were divided into community decision making, community facilitators, and the scientific community, and they deliberated upon various what kind of actions we can take to the resilient hill mountain settlements and environments to build these particular places. So in that way there's a very interesting ideas have come up, and of course they have been also again further deliberated by other groups. So for example, when they were worried about the damage onto the crops by the wild animals, they said we have to have a fence. You know, then again that has been argued by the other groups saying that, you know, why do we need a fence? You know, how can we fix these boundaries? You know, so like that, there's been certain deliberations. Similarly, they have even talked about how can we bring these schemes of the government schemes to the local level. You know, that is one of the challenge, and what are the actions we should take for that. And similarly, for education purpose, what we should do, how we can control these tourism activities. You know, they have come up with these ideas. So at this stage, we have run then the one round has been completed and the second round has been completed. So the communities have become the facilitators, and facilitators has become the academicians and scientific community, and they become the decision makers. In that way, rotation has been done. So in this particular process has given us some insights. Though it is not a completely finished with an action plan, but the next stage is we are going to talk about going to the community and elaborate on these ideas, and we are going to come up with some kind of concrete understanding of who will do what and how do they do, what kind of support they need, and all these aspects. I'm going to show you a small video of the Yonmenkaigi workshop which we have recently conducted.
एक ताकत है हमारी, आपका विषय नोटेड। अब आप और कुछ बोलना चाह रहे हैं कि हमारी ताकत क्या है?
देखिए, मैं जो बोलना चाहूँगी, जो ताकत मुझको जो सबसे बड़ा ताकत लगता है पहाड़ों को, वो क्लाइमेट है। जो शुद्ध एयर, जो शुद्ध एयर, शुद्ध वातावरण, जिसके लिए लोग जो शहर में नहीं मिल रहे हैं, वो वहाँ पे नेचुरली है। नेचुरली वो तो सबसे बड़ा ताकत है। इसीलिए गाँव का लोग जो देखेंगे वो नेचुरली हेल्दी है, बिकॉज मतलब वो टेनिंग जैसा है, ऊपर नीचे करना पड़ता है, शुद्ध एयर है, वो सबसे बड़ा ताकत है जो उसको मतलब जिसको जो भी फ्यूचर में जो भी होना चाहिए उसको लेके चलना चाहिए। नहीं, आप देखिए मसूरी में कैसे हो गया, मसूरी में अभी पॉल्यूशन आने लगा, क्यों लगा? क्योंकि उसको ताकत को हम उसको सेफगार्ड नहीं किया। तो मेन जो मुझको ताकत लगता है पहाड़ों का, ये सब यूनिटी और क्लाइमेट, गुड क्लाइमेट, हेल्दी क्लाइमेट।
एक ताकत हमारे पास है, एक शुद्ध जल मिलता है हमें, जो फिल्टर से भी ज्यादा छिड़के हुए निकलता है।
क्लाइमेट, नेचुरल रिसोर्स। तो हम
जो हमारी पौराणिक विद्या है,
बिलीफ सिस्टम,
फॉर्मली बिलीफ सिस्टम लुप्त होती जा रही, वो भी एक जागरूक कर रहे हैं गाँव में, ताकि आगे।
अच्छा, पौराणिक जो हमारी संस्कृति है, पहनाव प्लस जो हमारा कल्चर है, नाचने का, गाने का, वो फिक्स है। जैसे आज के जो है व्यायाम है ना, योगा है, वो हमारे जो है कल्चर में जुड़ा हुआ है।
मतलब किसी भी एक इवेंट के पीछे एक
जो हमारा
scientific
है ना, जो
reason।
एक देवता है हमारे जितने भी टाइटल्स हैं, या और भी जो पुरानी हमारी कई है कथाएं हैं, जो भी है, तो ये सारी एक बिलीफ है, बिलीफ सिस्टम है, स्ट्रॉन्ग बिलीफ सिस्टम है। अगरबत्ती है ना, अगरबत्ती है, उसको हम बिना खर्च किए हुए उसको जो है तैयार कर रहे हैं घर में। हमारे जो गांव की महिलाएं हैं, जैसे उपला टकनौर क्षेत्र में, उसको गोबर को मिला के जंगल से जो है जड़ी बूटी उसको मिला के उसको जो है धूप बत्ती में जो है हम
घर में जैसे दूध और गाय घी हुआ उसको मिलाकर
जैसे मोर्टीन का है ना, ये मोर्टीन के खरीद के लाते हैं, वो हमारा
नहीं, मैं
वो
समझ रहा हूँ।
वो बच्चों के लिए भी और कई चीजों के लिए भी कम है। नेचुरल वो
ठीक है।
वो हाइजीनिक भी है।
सो हम नेचुरल प्रोडक्ट्स, रिसाइकल्ड प्रोडक्ट्स और रीयूज प्रोडक्ट्स।
हाँ। सर्वदान का मतलब जो सार्वजनिक स्थल है, सार्वजनिक पुल है, सार्वजनिक रास्ता है, वो सपोज जो है अचानक से जो है बाढ़ आने से डूब गया है, रास्ता खराब हो गया है, तो उसको जो है सर्वदान के रूप में हम जो है 1 दिन 2 दिन 3 दिन तक उसके जो है हम दे सकते हैं उसको, कि हम सारे गांव के लोग जो है उसमें सर्वदान करें। अपने आप घंटी बजाएंगे, अपने आप मिस्त्री काम करेंगे, अपने आप जो है
मतलब श्रमदान
श्रमदान विदाउट एनी
श्रमदान।
गवर्नमेंट सपोर्ट।
कम्युनिटी लेवल
हाँ
गिवन लेबर टाइम
हाँ कम्युनिटी लेवल विदाउट गवर्नमेंट सपोर्ट।
पुराना नॉलेज है,
knowledge है।
उसको लेना कोई नहीं चाह रहा। यूट्यूब से सीख लेंगे, यूट्यूब में चले जाएंगे, लेकिन अपने बुजुर्गों से नहीं बात करें। तो
ये किस लिए हो रहा है, मतलब ये पूछना चाहता हूँ।
क्योंकि
पहले होते थे, अभी किस लिए नहीं?
अभी सब जनरेशन चेंज हो गई है, मतलब टेक्नोलॉजी से जुड़ गई है, तो वो एक जो पुराना वैसा
तो टेक्नोलॉजी आपको स्ट्रेंथ मानते हैं या वीकनेस मानते
दोनों स्ट्रेंथ भी है,
वीकनेस भी है,
हैं? तो इसमें डाल दो दोनों।
दोनों में है,
ये दोनों
टेक्नोलॉजी दोनों में है।
ये स्ट्रेंथ वीकनेस में आएगा या अक्सर खतरे में आएगा?
ये दोनों में
दोनों में है।
ये दोनों में ताकत भी है और उसमें भी है ना, कमजोरी भी है।
कमजोरी भी है।
या इसकी वजह से हमें काफी नुकसान भी हो रहे हैं, फायदे भी हो रहे हैं।
पुराना कुछ नहीं है।
सर उसको अभी क्या है, वो बैकवर्ड मान लिया है। ये जो बातें हैं, ये वो है, पुराने लोग जो बातें कर रहे हैं, ये पुराने लोग हैं, इनको कुछ पता नहीं है। लेकिन वो जो नॉलेज था, उस समय का जो नॉलेज था, वो जो नॉलेज उन्होंने उससे क्या कहते हैं, अपने एक्सपीरियंस से गेन किया हुआ नॉलेज। और वो एक्सपीरियंस से गेन किया हुआ नॉलेज टेक्नोलॉजी की वजह से, क्योंकि यूट्यूब आ गया, अब यूट्यूब पे ज्यादा विश्वास कर रहे हैं, अपने बुजुर्गों पे नहीं कर रहे। तो उसकी वजह से क्या हो गया कि वो जो मतलब जो कम्युनिकेशन जो ट्रांसफर होना था नए में, वो नहीं हो पा रहा, क्योंकि वो उसको वो पुराने लोगों की बातें अब वो समझ रहे हैं कि कोई वो नहीं है, मतलब ये इसमें कोई
शायद उसने बोल रहा है कि रेस्क्यू एंड रिलीफ के बारे में।
हाँ, rescue।
गांव में कोई ट्रेन पर्सन नहीं है रेस्क्यू के लिए, बराबर। तो ऐसे
अभी क्या
पूरा-
किया सर इन्होंने, अभी गवर्नमेंट ने कुछ वो किए हैं वैसे, लेकिन इनका ज्यादातर क्या होता है, फोकस्ड होता है, जैसे अभी उन्होंने बताया कि डिस्ट्रिक्ट हेडक्वार्टर में जब भी एक डिजास्टर की वो करते हैं, प्रैक्टिस करते हैं या कोई वो करते हैं, तो वो करते हैं मॉक ड्रिल कहेंगे, वो करते हैं डिस्ट्रिक्ट हेडक्वार्टर में या ब्लॉक में। तो उस समय क्या है, ये उनको नहीं जोड़ते हैं, जो विलेज पर्सन है उनको भी जोड़ के जब वो जोड़ेंगे, तब जाके तो वो जब ट्रांसफर होगा ना उधर तो वो अपनी खाली अपनी प्रैक्टिस करते हैं। एसडीआरएफ या एनडीआरएफ वाले,
So, DRR policies and training. पॉलिसीज एंड ट्रेनिंग।
कि गदेरे में ढालदार जगह जो है मकान नहीं बनने चाहिए। 2013 की बाढ़ में और 10 वाली बाढ़ में जहां भी जो है छोटी नदी में भी, छोटी जगह में जिसने मकान बनाया था वही ध्वस्त हुए। जो पुराने लोगों की चिन्हित जगह है ना, वहां डिस्टर्ब हुआ ही नहीं, कहीं भी नहीं डिस्टर्ब हुआ। नदी किनारे जहां मकान थे वही बहे, गांव में जिन्होंने जो है नालों में मकान बनाया था वही बहे, लेकिन जो गांव के पुराने लोगों की चिन्हित जगह है वहां कहीं डिस्टर्ब नहीं हुआ। स्लाइडिंग भी बहुत ना के बराबर स्लाइडिंग वही हुआ जहाँ जो है लोगों ने अपनी मर्जी से जो है मकान बना दिए बिना सोचे समझे। हमारे सेंसिटिव है बहुत ज्यादा, इसलिए जो है ज्यादा उसको वो करते हैं, ध्यान
नया
देते
है,
हैं।
तो
बहुत
ये
सेंसिटिव है, नया है,
युवा है, हिमालय जो
हाँ,
हमारा
हिमालय युवा
वो
है,
है,
इसलिए जो है
और
ज्यादा
बहुत फ्रजाइल है,
फ्रेजाइल
है ना। और इसमें जो जो ये विस्फोट करते हैं जो अभी वो बनाने के चक्कर में, वो एक जगह तो होता ही होता है, उसका सारा
उनको
आगे
सबको
तक
जो
हिला
है
के
फिल्म 18 किलोमीटर पैदल आगे जो है फिल्म में बसाना चाहे इनको, तब पता चलेगा सबको कि पैदल कैसे जाते हैं 18 किलोमीटर। जब 18 किलोमीटर जो है, सुनो सही, 18 किलोमीटर जो है हमारी माँ बहनों पर सबका टाइम होता है ना, 18 किलोमीटर आते आते जब उसके प्राण भी चले जाते हैं, बच्चे के प्राण भी चले जाते हैं ना, उसके बाद लगता है कि पर्यावरण की सुरक्षा कैसी होनी
ये
चाहिए।
वैसे दोनों में ही आएगा सर, स्ट्रेंथ में भी आएगा, उसमें भी आएगा।
वीकनेस में भी है ना,
Threat-
अवसर
threat
और
में
थ्रेट
भी
में
आएगा।
भी, अवसर भी है थ्रेट
नहीं,
भी है।
मैं वही
तीनों में
कह रहा हूँ ना,
हाँ,
होना चाहिए। देखिए उसको हम रोक ही नहीं सकते। हाँ बिल्कुल, पर उसमें ये है कि वो ऐसा हो कि जिससे पर्यावरण कम से कम नुकसान हो, है ना, उसका मैं
अल्टरनेटिव
नहीं
होना
कहना, नहीं
चाहिए,
होना चाहिए।
अल्टरनेटिव होना
हाँ,
चाहिए उसके।
अगर हम 100 पेड़ काटे
अल्टरनेट तो पहाड़ में
वो सही कह
है।
रहा, वो सही कह रहा, बिल्कुल होना चाहिए। हम भी नहीं है
नहीं,
डेवलपमेंट
ऐसे-
के खिलाफ में, और कोई भी नहीं रोक सकता डेवलपमेंट, है ना, कोई भी।
रूट्स पे क्योंकि मतलब पहले की जो जनरेशन थी उनको काफ़ी अच्छी नॉलेज थी, चाहे वो आर्किटेक्ट में हो, चाहे मेडिसिनल प्लांट्स में हो, चाहे नेचर के बारे में हो, हर चीज़ के बारे में उनको मतलब अच्छा नॉलेज था। तो पहला जो इसमें हमने पॉइंट किया था कि इसमें एक तो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन नहीं है किसी भी चीज़ का हमारे पास। तो जो पुरानी चीज़ें हैं, चाहे वो आर्किटेक्ट जो भी पुराने जो घर बनाए जाते हैं किस तरीके से बनाए जाते थे, या मेडिसिनल जो चीज़ें का यूज़ होता था, कहीं घाव लग गया या कुछ भी बुखार जुकाम जो भी चीज़ है, तो वो पहले गाँव मतलब उसी लोकल पे वो हो जाता था, उसको सॉल्व हो जाता था। तो उस चीज़ की एक डॉक्यूमेंटेशन होनी चाहिए, हर एक चीज़ का वो डॉक्यूमेंटेशन होना चाहिए कि किस तरीके से कौन सी चीज़ कहाँ पे है, क्या है, फिर उसको उस नॉलेज को जो है वो आगे वो मतलब फैल सकता है सब जगह पे कि किस चीज़ का क्या रोल है किस चीज़ में, चाहे वो फार्मिंग सिस्टम में हो।
टेक्नोलॉजी इंटीग्रेशन विद इंडिजिनस नॉलेज, मैंने आपको बता दिया, इट्स अ लॉन्ग टर्म प्लान। यूज ऑफ गवर्नमेंट स्कीम एंड इंस्ट्रूमेंट अप्रोप्रिएट। गवर्नमेंट की बहुत सारी स्कीम्स हैं, बहुत सारे इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स हैं, लेकिन हम उसको यूज में नहीं लाते। अगर हम उसको प्रॉपर यूज में लाएं, उसको एम्पावर करें अपने लिए, कम्युनिटी के लिए, तो लॉट ऑफ वर्क कैन बी डन।
17 मिनिस्ट्री है जो कम्युनिटी के लेवल पे पॉलिसीज बना रही है। टेक्सटाइल्स की एक हो गई, स्किल डेवलपमेंट की एक हो गई, वुमेन एम्पावरमेंट एंड सोशल जस्टिस की एक हो गई, टूरिज्म का एक हो गया डिपार्टमेंट। तो इतनी फ्रेगमेंटेड पॉलिसीज हैं और हर कोई कम्युनिटी के डेवलपमेंट की बात कर रहा है, बट उनका कोई कोहेसिव प्लान नहीं है, इट्स वेरी फ्रेगमेंटेड। तो उसको करने के लिए कुछ चैनलाइज करना पड़ेगा। वो मुझे
साइलोज में काम कर रहे हैं।
की इशू मुझे सबसे
हाँ,
ज़्यादा वो
this
लगता है।
is big issue actually, you know.
That is
ये
the problem
हाँ,
because we are working in a very fragmented
yeah, very
way.
fair. नहीं, इसमें तो हमने कई बार डिस्कस किया, गवर्नमेंट के साथ कई बार बात किया।
So, thank you all of you for your participation in our course, and I hope you have got benefited with certain understanding on the international studies in vernacular architecture, and we wish you all the best for your future endeavors. Thank you.